2 years ago, Callaway introduced two models into the Apex Forge range. It was the Apex Pro, the Apex Standard, and they were very much two different models for two different types of players. One very much at the player's market, the other perhaps for the aspiring player. They looked fantastic, they performed extremely well. But in 2021, they've introduced one more model into that range. It's the DCB, the Deep Cavity Back. And what that means is there's now an Apex Forged for every level of golfer out there right now.
Now, you could argue that starting a review based on its looks is not the best way to start because, well, it's very much subjective, and it's also, who cares what a club looks like? I suppose it's all about performance, but I don't necessarily buy into that. I think shelf appeal is massive, and for me, I've got to like the look of something even before I start to try it. These three irons are, in my opinion, arguably some of the best irons that are out there right now. They look absolutely stunning, and what I like about it is it doesn't matter which sort of profile you put yourself in terms of category that you put yourself in, they look good as a player's profile. That Apex Pro is stunning. Then look into the standard product, which is maybe more where I'd put myself in terms of the category, and then you look at the DCB. The other thing they've done incredibly well, we'll talk about later, is the idea that you can streamline possibly even all three of these sets into a combo set to make sure that you're optimizing every opportunity that Callaway are giving you with these irons. But that's enough of that. I'm going to hit some golf balls, but I'm just going to give you a little bit of detail, tech spec, why they've made these so special in terms of, I think consistency is the key word in all of this.
It's an interesting story from Callaway, and the tech is really led by computers. It's more of AI design, and I think what it's done, it's led to very much individually designed irons. That means you've got different face patterns for not only each of the different models within the Apex range, but you've got different face patterns for every single iron within each of those ranges. You've got different amounts of tungsten placed in each of those irons, and the positioning of the tungsten is also different in every one. It's almost like having a bespoke iron design for every single model that they've got in their range, and every single iron from a wedge right through to the 3-iron. Well, what does that mean for an average golfer? Well, I think with Callaway paying such attention to detail in the design of each of these irons, it means that we're getting optimal performance out of each club, but you're also getting a high level consistency. And the consistency is about ball speeds, it's about launch angles, and it's also about spin numbers. And that's really, really important, especially from when you go from these things used to be achieved in a player's iron, but you used to forfeit forgiveness. And down in the sort of game improvement iron, they were the kind of things, spin numbers, consistency of ball speeds were always issues. So for them to be able to streamline that throughout these three product ranges is an incredible feat. At least that's what they're saying they've done. But will that ring true when I get out there and eventually test these things? But before we leave the tech spec, what I want you to have a look at is this quick drawing. It's a heat map, and it's a comparison between the CF19 model and the CF21. A heat map which shows the decrease in ball speeds when not finding the centre of the club face. And if you look at that CF19 comparison to this model, you start to see how these new versions become more forgiving, and that sweet spot is getting ever bigger, and that's got to be good news. So that's it. We don't need to know any more in terms of tech spec. What we want to know is how these things performed in my hands. So let's get back to 4Golf.
Yeah, it's an interesting tech story, and I think tungsten is played a major part in every one of these clubs. I think first of all, from a looks perspective, top line is a big deal, and is a very noticeable difference, as you can see, between the three. It's very easy to identify which is the Pro and which is the DCB. And again, depending on where you sit, what profile you fit into is what you will choose. But I think if I was looking on the shelf, I'm drawn immediately to the Apex Pro. It looks absolutely stunning. One of the best looking irons that's out there right now. But then reality hits and you've got to think to yourself, and what level do you play at, and can I really get the performance out of the Pro? So then I'm shifting myself perhaps down into that standard category, and that idea of mixing the standard in with the DCB is a real interesting combination. But I'm going to collect data and see if that rings true, because I've said before, there can be a preconception that I can't play, which is what is in my hand, is the Apex Pro. We've got 3 7 irons, one from each of the range. I'll see how they perform differently. They're lofted differently, so we expect different yardages, but is there going to be different spin? Is there going to be different launch angles? Have a look at all those things, and then I'll give you a bit more of an opinion in terms of how I think these things play. But for now, I just love the look of these Apex Pro. And based on that one, we'd be all right, but this is only a 7 iron in hand. The Apex Standard is very much the middle ground. It kind of, it's got a thick enough top line to inspire confidence in their head. We know it's a massive big deal. You see the Apex Pro, you see the thin top line, perhaps a little bit of doubt starts to creep in, questioning, are you really good enough to play that iron, and do you want to see a bit more mass? And I think that's what, straight away, stepping up into the Standard is what you start to see. Again, solid strike. You can tell even from, I've literally gone from the Pro into this. I'm now going to hit the DCB. And quite honestly, you can see the difference in yardage straight away. Comment on the DCB. It definitely goes into that game improvement category in a forged iron, which I think is fantastic. The top line becomes noticeably different, but not in a way, you don't see any of the backside of it. There's no major looking, it's clearly more offset. I don't know whether that's technically correct, but it certainly looks that way. But it's not to a degree where it would have me majorly off-put, or be majorly off-putting. And again, I've hit 3 solid irons with each of those, 3 solid 7 irons. I need to go and collect a fair bit of data, and like I said, I'll give you an assessment of all 3, but I'll tell you something now before we go much further. These are an absolutely belting set of irons. I don't care what that data tells me. I can tell you at this point, having hit each of these and a number of shots with them, they're very, very good indeed. That's a great feeling iron. I think what I've tried to do there is I've hit one iron after each other just to try and ascertain the difference in sort of sound and feel, and there clearly is one. I mean, these are all the same in terms of a forged head with tungsten in its makeup, but there is definitely a softer feeling from the Apex Pro to the DCB, and I think the standard product that sits in the middle is almost that happy, perfect medium. I think that really does tick a lot of boxes for a lot of golfers, you know, and like I said, it sounds and feels absolutely spot on.
So you've got my general feel on this. I'm pretty impressed with what I think they've done, and as I said, irrelevant of data, but let's have a look at that. And I'm going to throw the 3 averages straight on screen for you now. So don't forget, this is 7 irons. The important thing to note is they are lofted. The Pro model is 30 degrees, 30.5 on the standard, and 33 degrees on the DCB. The numbers, and start with at the bottom there, you've got the Pro, which is 6.8 spin, 150 carry, 18.6 launch, 110 ball speed, 46 degrees descent angle. That to me is a number that you'd expect from a player's iron. That 150 carry 7 iron, 6.8 spin was it, and that descent angle, that is absolutely perfect. It's optimum numbers, and that ball speed of 110 was very consistent, I can tell you that. If you then move to the standard product, we've got half an inch stronger, 154 carry it starts off with, 6.3 spin, 18 degree launch, 112 ball speed, 46 descent angle. Again, a minor drop off in spin, but still that ball is doing nothing but stop at that descent angle and that amount of RPM spin on it. And again, ball speed and distances increases just that little bit, and it is almost that half a degree that you'd expect. And then you go into the DCB model. This is stronger by 3 degrees from the Pro model, and you'll see 5/8 spin, 161 carry, 15/9 launch, 115 ball speed, 44 descent angle. And again, probably everything you'd expect in terms of data you've seen there, but it's the consistency that's the key element that I think is important. And even if you go to the DCB model, so we class that definitely as a game improvement style design, it's still produced incredibly good numbers. The consistency was fantastic. I literally hit quite a lot of balls with each of these. The difference I mentioned was sound. I think there's a much purer feeling from the Pro compared to that DCB. But again, you're really trying to pick minor errors. I think the biggest thing they've got going for them, and again I mentioned it earlier, is the ability to blend sets, and I can almost see the idea of blending right through from Pro into the shorter irons, mid irons to be the standard, and then maybe sticking a 4 or 5 iron in the DCB would be the perfect combination. And don't forget, you'll be able to bend these and adjust lofts to make sure that fits absolutely perfectly. In fact, I think that's something, a standard offering from Callaway, in that that's how you can buy them, with the lofts already adjusted so it all sits very nicely, which is a great idea. The final thing I'm going to mention, a lot of people always ask me about price. I never always quote it because it's RRP that we get, but it's 1099 is the retail price. I'm told they're gonna be about 150 British pounds per club, and I think that puts them, for this build of product and what's built in terms of the technology story, it puts them right in the ballpark where they need to be. It's competing exactly where it wants to be with all its major players, but I think what they've done is produced definitely a set, or not a set, a model range that is pretty much unparalleled. I think the only range that springs to mind is, again, what Mizuno did with the MP20s, a similar sort of concept in being able to go from that sort of chunkier game improvement right down to a player's blade. I suppose they did something similar. But I've got to say, hats off to Callaway. It's a fantastic product and a real great set of irons. And from what I've seen, certainly one to beat for 21. But as ever, that's my opinion. Looks is a major part of it because I think they look fantastic. All again pretty subjective stuff, but I think performance-wise it's hard to argue with. My interest is from comments down below. Again, what you've seen so far, what are your thoughts on these Callaway irons, and are they going to be on your to try list this year? Right, that's me done. As ever, thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking around, because you're bombarded with this stuff, I know, at the moment, and it's not going to stop either. We've got another one out tomorrow night. So maybe if you like what you've seen, consider subscribing, hit that like button, and I'll see you all soon.